Good evening, folks. I appreciate you joining me here today on Deep River Farm. The video here we're going to talk today about is there's been a question asked how past flooding is being used by property owners, insurers to assess the climate threats. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today and see just where things stand with property owners and insurers. Now, the structures at risk of flooding in the United States could be higher than previously thought, according to a study that has recently been published. The study was published found that 43% of flooded buildings in North Carolina between 1996 and 2020 were located outside the Federal Emergency Management Agency's Special Flood Hazard Area. That are areas that Foxtrot Echo Mike Alpha projects have a 1% risk of flooding in a given year. The findings here could help more communities get a better handle on their flood risk and the flood insurance needs, the study said. Flood insurance has become increasingly hard to get as some companies increase the price, they jack it up, of policies or step back from insuring homes in certain markets due to more frequent and severe weather. That has left property owners more vulnerable. Well, folks, that just brings us right to the subject here with this information about the insurers in certain markets due to more frequent and severe weather are pulling out or stepping back or refusing to cover people. The question is, folks, if they're not in a floodplain now, they cannot get flood insurance. So, you've got all of these people that are in these areas that hold a mortgage, and the mortgage company forces them to get homeowners insurance, but they can't get flood insurance because they're not in a designated flood area that has been deemed so by Foxtrot Echo Mike Alpha. In other words, it's a 1% chance or less that they'll even be flooded. Therefore, they don't qualify to receive any chance at getting flood insurance. But as soon as a flood takes place, especially those caused by the overhead spraying, and we know this to be fact. One of the fellows has been studying this quite intensely that I've been watching and listening to is Dan Whittington, and he talks specifically about how that stuff works, what they are doing it for, what reasonings are behind it, and the outcomes of it. Although, on the other side of the coin, the companies that are actually doing it, they all claim that it has very little benefit. So my question would be, if it has very little benefit, why are they doing it? Why do they have a fleet? I ain't talking about 1, 2, or 5 planes. I'm talking about 18 to 20 come through at a time spraying this if it's not very effective, if it doesn't create an amount of precipitation increase. Why would you do it? I think it's the same kind of perspective, folks, that the same information we received from the tobacco companies back in the day, claiming that, the little white sticks that you puffed on didn't cause any addiction. There was no addictive materials in that, so therefore they were considered to be safe. They hid the fact that all of the chemicals in it didn't cause any addiction and they were safe. So it sounds like we're getting fed the same type of rhetoric from these companies claiming that it's not very effective, it's not cost effective, and it doesn't increase the possibility of obtaining any additional percentage of accumulation of precipitation to amount to anything, which is, I feel like, a big lie, because we continually see the spraying going on left and right and up and down, and it looks like they're playing tic-tac-toe in the air. Therefore, you can about bet if they're spraying within 48 hours, if they're doing a heavy spray trail up there, about 48 hours you're going to have moisture come in, precipitation fall, whether it be rain, hail, sleet, or snow. And generally, if they do it at the right times, I don't know if it controls the wind or not, but I would say that if you're rapidly cooling or heating the atmosphere, there's a very good chance it's creating all of the wind as well. So that's something that needs to be addressed. Now, Foxtrot Echo Mike Alpha's maps are the main source nationally to identify the flood-prone areas and what structures need to be insured, but experts say the system is outdated and has a low resolution. The 100-year floodplain protection doesn't paint a complete picture of what areas are likely to flood. And the CC, the Charlie Lima Indigo Mike Alpha Tango Echo, and then you add the next word behind it, change, rendered previous, what is that? They claimed it was reliable, productive, authoritative, and reliable information. So they say. The study's use of address level data allowed researchers to pinpoint specific buildings that had flooded more than one time. The information could help property owners know whether they should be purchasing flood insurance even outside of the Foxtrot Echo Mike Alpha's flood hazard zones. In the U.S., 99% of counties have flooded at least once, but only 4% of homeowners have flood insurance, according to Foxtrot Echo Mike Alpha. And the problem is, if you're not in the flood area, you can't get into the National Flood Insurance Program. That's the big problem. And then your mortgage company demands payment when you're flooded and your homeowner's insurance refuses to pay. So my thing would be, if you're going to mandate homeowner's insurance from a mortgage company, that policy should be a policy that is a no questions asked, full coverage policy. Whether it's wind, rain, flood, earthquake, landslide, mudslide, any of that, fire, it should be covered. If you're forced to be covered, then the insurance company should be forced to pay, one way, shape, or form. And that's what's happening to these folks in the mountains, on the coast, and other places where they're generating these storms. We'll go ahead and just call it what it is. They're geo-engineering the storms and all of the rain, and it's causing the biggest part of the problem. Now, my opinion is that they're using this creation of the geo-engineering to manipulate the CC, Charlie Lima Indigo Mike Alpha Tango Echo, followed by the words behind it, change. They're doing this to manipulate it and to make people think that that thing is actually true. If they would leave it alone, I don't think you'll have the problems. You won't have all the flooding, you won't have all the severe weather, you won't have all the wind, You won't have hail balls the size of bowling balls and that type thing, because that is what they're creating. You never had all these issues back in the day when they wasn't doing all of this so much. I realize they've been doing this since the Vietnam War, when you can look it up, Operation Popeye started. They were using this stuff to manipulate the weather in Vietnam to try to flood the tunnels out, to drive the communists out from underground of them tunnels so that they could see them and fight them. So that's where this stands right now, folks. So right now, Foxtrot Echo Mike Alpha is in the process of redeveloping its flood mapping system through an initiative called the Future of Flood Risk Data, that it says will provide a more comprehensive look at flood hazards and risk in the country using more efficient and accurate and consistent technology. So they're basically going to use computer mapping, I believe, with elevations and things to determine over a broad range area what could be flooded and what couldn't be. But there's a lot of possibilities that some areas could lie lower than what is shown on a data, and then there's other locations that could have a high hill in that area, and it's just a kind of a rainbow type or an arc to draw out these lines that would create areas that could or could not be in a flood zone by doing so. Now they talk here that as the planet warms, now that's also self-induced. The more, if you've ever paid attention to the weather, if you're out in the country, it's always colder in the country than in the city. And then the city has a warmer temperature because it has all the asphalt, has all the concrete, it has all the brick, and it has all the rooftops. Therefore, you're going to be generating more heat in the city, where you got a larger concentration of people. You got more automobiles holding heat. You got the homes that are running their heat, have fires in their fireplaces and wood stoves, and also exerting out their heat running out of their dryers in their homes right straight out into the air, heating the air up. Out in the country, you don't have so much as that. You got the forest and the fields, gravel driveways, and you got rivers and creeks and things like that. Nothing to hold the heat that much. You might have a tin roof on a pole barn, but there's no insulation, so it's not heated, nor is it cooled. So therefore, you have a stabilized temperature inside or outside of the barn. The only thing you would have a heat source in is generally going to be possibly an outbuilding that might contain a water stove or someone's home. Now, they talk about heavier rainfall is becoming more common because the hotter the air can hold, the hotter the air is, the more moisture it can hold, which later falls as rain. Climate, and then they follow with the change, is also leading to rise in global sea levels. Now let's just stop right there and talk about that lie. If there was going to be a huge rise in the sea level, when that's going to happen, I'm going to be the first to watch, and you should be too. If this is a true statement, we should see people just absolutely selling their homes on the coast and getting away, especially these people that are big into the CC, like Al Gore and all these former presidents, Obama. They've all got houses on Cape Cod and Nantucket and all these high dollar areas. If you thought climate change was real, these people would not have a home on the coast where they're supposedly going to have this big rise in sea level. So let's go ahead and thwart that lie right off the bat as well. Which has made coastal water and even some inland waters more vulnerable to flooding. That's what they claim. Now, Hurricane Helene was the third deadliest hurricane of the modern era. Severe flooding in the mountain areas in the middle of North Carolina damaged a total more than $78 billion in this article, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So now we've heard 60 billion, we've heard 78 billion, we've heard 6,000 roads, 7,000 roads, and 8,000 roads and bridges damaged. Depends on what source you're looking at. They just pull a number right out of the air. They're close, but they vary so much. A climatologist from North Carolina said warmer ocean waters, which also feeds the storms, could have been a factor in fueling the tropical storm Chantal as well, which broke rainfall and rivercrest records in the state. Now that's the one that hit the center part of the state and flooded down the Hall River and some of that. There was some damage, but nothing like it was in the mountains of North Carolina. There were a few homes washed and flooded and vehicles washed away and things like that, but nothing like what happened in the mountains. They did a study, the researchers did the study and mapped 78 flood events between 96 and 2020. The Foxtrot Echo Mike Alpha program, through which property owners can purchase for potential flood-related issues. They also use those emergency service requests and volunteer geographic information, which were acquired through social media posts to create what they described as first of its kind database. Data on your past floods is often difficult for the general public to access, which make it challenging for homeowners to know whether their property has previously flooded in the past or not. Researchers can use the same methods from the study to create a similar historical maps for the regions across the nation to help officials identify these areas in their state and they may not have previously thought of as a flood risk. Now the study goes on to say here that they're redeveloping these areas for a 100-year floodplain so that people can determine whether they need flood insurance or not. But unless they're in that designated floodplain, they're not going to be able to get it. You can probably obtain a rider for it, but it's going to cost you a significant amount of money. And but the historic floods, the great big ones that are beyond 100 years, they're considering 500 or 1,000-year floods. There's really no data for that, and they're saying people need to be made aware of if the area has ever flooded. Well, I got news for them. It says in the Bible that the Lord flooded the earth. So that makes the whole place a floodplain. So, he says he'll never do it again. That's why he put the rainbow in the sky. But he didn't say that man would not be able to do it again. And that's what's taking place when they continually do all this spraying to cause all of these significant storms. Well, folks, I appreciate you joining me here today on Deep River Farm. I hope everybody has a blessed day.